This podcast is sponsored by Lightens. Lightens, your best source for OE quality automotive and heavy-duty accessory drive tensioning devices. We know tensioners because we invented them.
Johnny Gamauf, welcome to AMN Drivetime, sponsored by Lightens.
Well, thank you for having me, Billy. Appreciate it.
We're glad to have you. I thought, Johnny, for the benefit of our audience, I would quickly go over just broad strokes about your resume. So you're a 50-year veteran of the tire industry.
Yes.
You started out with Firestone as a tire buster in the late 60s and rose through the company's ranks, working in different sales positions for Bridgestone-Firestone until you became president of consumer replacement tires for Bridgestone-Firestone North America in 2003.
That's correct.
During your tenure at Bridgestone-Firestone, Johnny, you were responsible for creating Bridgestone's affiliated dealer program and helped navigate the company through one of the largest tire recalls in history. And as I remember, in that period, John, you did not lose one tire dealer customer.
Not at all, not one.
And I'm sure we'll talk about that. Tire dealers know you, Johnny, as Johnny G, and you are one of the most dynamic, influential, respected individuals in the tire industry. And we're just thrilled to have you.
Wow, I got goosebumps. Thank you, Billy, for that intro.
So, John, you had a 50-year career with Bridgestone-Firestone. Not many people can say that. Take us through some of the highlights and the different positions you've held at Bridgestone-Firestone. As I recall, John, you started right at the bottom.
Yeah, it was 1969, May. I was fresh out of high school, going to college, and needed a job for the summer. So there was a Firestone store in the south side of Chicago. I walked in. I wore a white shirt and a tie for some reason. And the assistant manager interviewed me, and after 20 minutes, he said, "Okay, kid, I got the job opening. I got two jobs. One's called the manager of passenger tire sales. The other one's a tire buster. Which one do you want?" I said, "Well, if you're not going to pay me, I'll take the title." So I became a manager of passenger tire sales, which is a fancy name for a salesman. So first 3 weeks, I'm selling, 20, 24 tires every day, 6 days a week, and knocking it out of the park. And then I go look at my paycheck, and I got a 20-cent raise to $1.80. So I walked up to my boss and I said, "So you're pretty impressed with me, huh?" He said, "What are you talking about, kid?" I said, "You just gave me a 20-cent raise." He said, "Go look at the employee bulletin board." So I walked down the corridor by the bathrooms, and there's the employee bulletin board, and it says, "Effective June 1st, the government gives you a minimum wage of $1.80. And I go, "Oh, so the government gave me." And then he comes around the corner, and he says, "Hey, good news." He said, "2 tire busters just quit. You're going out to the shop to bust tires for the rest of the summer." And at that moment, I said, "Oh, my world's crashing down. How do you start as a salesman selling 20, 24 tires a day, and now you're going to be a tire buster?" And I thought that was the worst thing that could happen in my career. But in fact, it was the best thing that could happen to me, because anybody that runs businesses and understands that there's a culture, it doesn't matter if it's a restaurant with the chefs in the kitchen and then the servers out front, there's a cultural difference between the tire store, showroom floor, and the shop. And until you learn that, you won't be successful in running a tire business or any tire and service business. So I got the respect of the guys out in the shop, and when I came back next summer, they were able to always take my ticket first, it seemed, and gave me a little preferential treatment. So that's how I started, and then I earned my stripes, Billy, like everybody does, like you did. You earn your stripes in business. I was from store manager to store supervisor to district manager to zone manager. And then one day they said, "Hey, kid, we're going to send you to Connecticut." I couldn't even spell Connecticut. I can today. Connect with an I with a cut. But bottom line is I had a great ride. And in 1986, I got a phone call to come into Akron, Ohio, right here where we're at now, to head up a company called Dayton Tire, which was purchased by Firestone. And I had a blast doing that for 3 years. And then right around late 88, I took over Firestone brand from my mentor, Tom Mertz. And so at 36 years old, I went from a tire buster at 17 to at 36 years old, holding the whole Firestone brand, including ag, off the highway, medium truck, passenger, everything. I mean, it was a dream come true. And then there was rumors that Pirelli of Italy and Michelin of France is going to come in and buy us. So I started boning up on my Italian and boning up on my French. And 3 weeks after that, Bridgestone of Tokyo, Japan comes in and buys us all out. And the next thing I know, I got to start learning how to speak Japanese. So that's sort of how it all happened, and from the rest is history, you know.
And John, where were you born and raised?
South side of Chicago, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Born in South side of Chicago, actually not too far from White Sox Park, and lived there up until mid-20s, and then started moving around with the company.
Got it. So you started as a tire buster. What equipment were you using then in the 60s? The equipment in the tire shops has changed dramatically in the last couple of decades or more.
Yeah, you know, and not only the equipment, but the tires themselves, you know, because we had these skinny 83 series tires, you know. It's like records, you know, the 78s and the 45s. These were 83 series, and for those of you, it's a real skinny tire, and if you have to mount it on a 1010A, that's a real problem. But the 2020 was really where I started on, worked my way up to the 30-30, 40-40, and once the new technical RC5As and all the stuff that Hunter makes comes in, it was like, you know, I better do something else because it's getting too difficult there. But yeah, that was probably my learning experience of learning on those type of equipment. But the other thing was the bubble balancer. I mean, you know, think about it. We didn't have the spin balancers back then, so you'd always try to go around and close all the doors, and the mechanics, they call them technicians now, would start yelling, "What are you closing the door for? It's hot in here. I got to balance a tire," because it would be going like this, and you're trying to put the wheel weights on it, you know. So yeah, technology has changed a lot from the old days.
You know, John, as an aside, my first job out of college was in a Goodyear store.
Oh.
And I changed tires, and I balanced tires. It was better equipment in the mid-'80s than it was in the 60s.
Yeah.
But I can relate to being back there with a whole gang making it all work.
And now they're going to replace us with robo tires or whatever, robots and stuff. So who knows?
So you touched on it a little bit, John, but you've seen some first in your career when it comes to tires, tire technology, and the tire industry. Can you talk about some of those things? It might be race tire lap best, sustainability. What have you seen? What really strikes you as especially important or memorable?
Yeah, I've got two stories quick to share with you. One was in Tokyo, Japan. We were at one of our factories there, and we always would bring customers in a couple times a year, a dozen customers or so. And we were walking through the factory, and I noticed a big curtain put up in the back. And I said to my boss, who's now our chairman, global chairman, Shu Ishibashi, I said, "Shu, what's behind the curtain?" "Oh, top secret," he said. I go, "Oh." He said, "But you're an employee, you can see. Customer connect." So they took him off on another part of the tour, and I went behind there, and Billy, when I got behind the curtain, it was like something I would see at Walt Disney World. I mean, it was Disney. It was amazing. It was like a tire was being made without anybody ever touching it, and it was like, oh my God, this is 1996. What's going on? And I said, how long have we been working on this? And he said, 10 years. I said, 10 years? When are we going to put it in production? "Oh, no, maybe be another 10 years or so." I go, oh my God, we could use this. And sure enough, right around 2005, 6, we opened up that type of plant in Monterrey, Mexico, where they just walk around with, handheld iPads, and they control all the machinery. Nobody ever touches the tire. All the tires are made through robots and stuff. It's just amazing.
My goodness.
Yeah. So that's the one story. The other story is we were walking across the right here in Akron, Ohio. It was early 2000, maybe 2002, and WADA was the head of technology at the time. And we were talking about natural rubber because at the time with Liberia and Indonesia, it was hard getting the natural rubber, and it's not as environmentally friendly as we would like it. Bridgestone works on, environmental things all the time. And so he said, "Go pull that dandelion over there." So walk across where Harvey Firestone's statue is right there in front of our research center. I pulled this dandelion, and it wasn't the one with the yellow. It was the one with the white stuff. And you go like that, and you blow it and all those things. So he cracked it, and that white juice came out of there. And he says, "Gamauf, son, someday we will have a plant that grows in the desert called waiule, and we will then be able to replace natural rubber." And here we are in 2022 at this year's Indy 500. They had different sets of tires, and all the ones with the green sidewalls were made with this waiule plant that's grown in the desert, which is very environmental friendly. And at the Grand Prix in Nashville a few weeks back, same thing. So it's coming. They just made a major investment of another $50, $100 million to put into that plant. So you're going to see this in passenger tires that the consumer will be having in the near future, which I think is cool, is that we're using something that grows out of the ground to put on there, because obviously as it wears off, that's a much more friendly environment than having natural rubber.
So, John, you have a ton of relationships in this business. To this day, and you've been retired a couple of years, some of the most solid relationships with tire dealers throughout the entire country. You showcase those relationships in a sister podcast at Babcox Media called Johnny G and Friends. Tell us a little bit about your podcast, and from your conversations with tire dealers, what are some of the key challenges and opportunities for tire dealers as we sit here in 2022?
Well, first of all, thank you for being very insistent with me a couple years ago. For the audience here, Mr. Babcox called me and said, hey, we had a meeting and we decided that it'd be good for you to do a podcast. I said, I don't want to do a podcast. I don't even watch podcasts. And he goes, no, you should do it. And lo and behold, the short story is I was talking to Mario Andretti, I was talking to Larry Morgan, who are two legends. And I said, hey, if I end up doing this, would you do a podcast? I go, yeah, we'll do a podcast. And so that's how I got into podcast business, is because of you. So thank you very much. But I think there's a variety of stuff. And with the pandemic, it's created a lot more challenges for these guys. But if there was one thing, I think it's getting good employees, and retaining them. And not only it used to always be from the technical side, but now I think it's also from the sales and marketing side of getting good employees to do that. But the dealers that I've talked to on my podcast have all seemed to adapt well. Some of them are looking at making it more friendly for the employees. I got one dealer in Teletire in Missouri. He doesn't open on Saturdays and Sundays, so that's a pretty nice perk when you're not having to work. You're working a 5-day week and you get the weekends off. I never had that in my career. I always work Saturdays and Sundays. So different challenges, but that's pretty much what they're facing today.
And John, you have a lot of relationships, but you've met a lot of fun, interesting, high-profile people in your career. Mario Andretti, among others. You've been to a lot of IndyCar racers. Any inside baseball things you can share with our audience with some of your famous friends and events you've attended?
Well, Mario and I spent quite a bit of time. We had known each other, but until 2000, when we had this thing with Ford and Firestone, with the Ford Explorer, we really didn't know each other that well. But you spend 50 days on the road with somebody, and from morning to night, you get to know each other real well. And we developed a nice respect for each other. So one day I was sitting in my office in Nashville, and I got a phone call, and then my secretary, Emily, came in and said, hey, the mayor from Calgary is on the phone. And I said, okay. So we were heading up there. Mario and I were going to do a grand opening and do some publicity stuff. And so the mayor said, hey, Johnny G, I'd like to know if you and Mario would like some Calgarian hospitality. I said, sure. What do you got in mind? He said, how about a bobsled run? We have the Olympic Park where we had the Olympics, and I'll get an Olympic driver, and I'll get an Olympic brakeman, and we'll take you guys down the run and whatever. I said, well, hold on. Let me get Mario on the phone. So I called Mario. He answered right away. I said, Mario, I got the mayor of Calgary on the phone. He wants to know if you want some hospitality. You want to do a bobsled run? He said, hell yeah. Anything that goes fast, I'm in for. And so that's how we did it. So the next day after we did the bobsled run, which was a blast, we're walking at the airport, and he's walking really gingerly. And I said, what's the matter, buddy? He said, what's the matter? Because it's a buddy system when you're in there. It's a 4-man bobsled, right? And so my knees, I was 3, Mario was 2. My knees were in his ribs, and he swears today that I cracked his right rib. And so every morning he says, I think about you, Johnny G, because you cracked my right rib, and I feel that every morning. So that'd be one of the funniest stories I could share with you in my careers with Mario.
That's a great story. I can't believe I've not heard that one before. So you touched briefly on it, and I maybe you don't want to belabor it, but the tire recall with Ford was a big darn deal. There was a long relationship between Ford and Firestone. There was marriage between Fords and Firestones. In fact, they got married in Akron, Ohio. I don't know what year it was, but many, many years ago, a Ford and a Firestone. And you had this recall, and you were in the middle of it on the Firestone side dealing with dealers. And you came to present at Babcox Media in 2000 or 2001 when this was all going on, and you were just in the middle of it. And as it all ended up, Firestone came out completely scot-free. You were not liable in any way. But maybe just give our audience just a couple of thoughts about that.
Yeah, that was probably the most, I'll use the word interesting part of my career. But I think in life, you have adversity. Okay, it doesn't matter if it's a divorce or somebody's dying in your family or has a health problem. You have adversity. It's how you face that adversity. So we never saw this coming. Okay, it's a small amount of tires, a couple hundred tires out of 48 million, I think we made for a 10-year period. And when you have a problem in the tire world, your customers pick up the phone and call you. I never had one customer. I was vice president at the time. I never had one customer to call me up and say, "Hey, you got a problem here." You know, Larry Morgan, Paul Zerker, whoever, never called me to say we had a problem. So what we ended up doing was getting the facts. And the more that we looked at the facts, we said, okay, here's where we're at. Yeah, we probably lowered our air pressure based on Ford's willingness to do that. But in the long and the short of it all, the reason why we didn't lose any customers is because Mario, myself, a bunch of us, my whole team, spent 307 days on the road that year, going door to door, visiting customers, and giving them the facts. Let them make the decision. And once they did that, then they would say, okay, we're going to stand up for you. We're going to fight for you. So when a customer would come in and throw their keys on the table and say, put a set of tires on, and say, we're going to put a set of Firestones, they go, wait a second, I heard all that news on the TV about, oh, no. They would take that 5 or 10 minutes to talk to the customer. You know, because your grandfather's been coming to this store, your father's been coming to the store, and now you're coming to the store, and I'm telling you the best tires to put on there are Firestone. Then they would say, okay, put on the Firestones. And that was the key to success, was that our store base of people as well as our dealer base held it together and fought the battle. And, you know, so as I said, you either get weaker or you get stronger. We got stronger. And up until just recently, the largest rubber tire company in the world. So, you know, I think it's how you face adversity in these kind of situations. And today we're a stronger company.
I remember when you were here, very near to where we're sitting right now, you did a wonderful presentation to our whole company and laid out your side of the story. And I remember it's sort of like it was yesterday, and it was a very compelling story. Your side, it was very fact-based, and you did a nice job.
Yep.
So, John, you've been known over the years to host some incredible events. I think of some incredible events in Vegas. But Bridgestone was a sponsor of the Super Bowl halftime show. How many years did you do that?
Oh, it was initially 5 years, and then we had some runoffs on that. But we've had an involvement with the National Football League for almost 20 years.
So tell us about that, being the sponsor of the Super Bowl halftime show, and what goes into that. That's a high-profile, big deal.
So you know Paul Harvey, right?
Yeah, sure.
Legendary newscaster. He would, radio guy, he would say, and that's the rest of the story. So what you have to hear, Billy, is the rest of the story. We had no intentions of getting into sponsoring the Super Bowl, you know. And but what happened was, the rest of the story, I guess I can tell you this because it's been over 15 years. Goodyear at the time was having some issues with some of their tires in NASCAR, and the drivers were complaining. Well, we have in NASCAR, we have guys like Chip Ganassi and Roger Penske. They're in NASCAR, but they're also in IndyCar. And he said to the rest of the NASCAR owners, hey, we have Firestone. Why don't we give them a shot at maybe making us some tires? So we worked with NASCAR for almost 18 months behind the scenes, going in there to take over maybe one of the series or all the series, just depending on what the numbers were. We were buying property down in the Carolinas. I got hundreds of millions of dollars because that's what it's going to take. I'd fly over to Tokyo, Japan with you, and we'd get this money. And we were all ready to go until I think it was Bill France Jr., when he was in the hospital, signed a 7-year extension with Goodyear, and we were out. And it's like, oh, my God, I'm not giving back that money. I worked too hard to get it. So I met with the Richards Group out of Dallas, Texas, and they're the largest independently held company that worked on sports marketing.
Yeah. I'm familiar with the Richards Group.
Okay, and Stan Richards, a great guy. He understood that Bridgestone was here. Some people didn't even know it was a tire. They thought it was there's a Breckstone, which is a yogurt or whatever. So they didn't know whether it was a tire or a yogurt back in those days. And so how do we elevate Bridgestone brand up to here? Everybody knew what Firestone was. Everybody knew what Goodyear was and whatever, but Bridgestone was not well known. So he started drawing circles, and the biggest circle that they have in sports marketing, maybe golf is this big and hockey is this big and NCAA is this big, but this is the National Football League. And he said, if you want to really make a splash, you should be the sponsor of the National Football League. So after looking at all of those other venues, golf and hockey, and we got back to football, and one day they picked up the phone and said, hey, somebody at Pepsi upset somebody at the Super Bowl, and they want to know, do you want the halftime show? Do you want a halftime show? That's like the biggest thing, And commercials back then, I think, were like $1.9 million for 30 seconds or whatever. And I was like, yeah, we'll take it. And so we put all the numbers together. But, National Football League wants commitments. They don't want somebody for 1 or 2 years. They want 5 and 10-year deals. So I give my credit to my boss at the time, Mark Emkes, because if we would have had to go over to board meetings to get this approved, it wouldn't have got approved. We had like a 3-day window to get this handled. And so we moved forward with Super Bowl commercials, which then really took Bridgestone to a whole nother level. And then from that, we fed off to other venues and stuff. But sports marketing turned out to be the best. So even though we felt down in the dumps that we never got into NASCAR, I think we came out okay with all the other venues that we ended up being in.
So, John, as you sit here, I'm sure, I don't know how old you are, but you're at least 60. What is one piece of advice that you would give to your younger self when you were 19 years old and being a tire buster in Chicago?
Well, it's my gut feel that goes back to everything that's all about business, and it's relationships. It doesn't matter about whether you're having relationships at home with your wife, in your marriage, with your kids, your family, or with your business associates. The core foundation of doing business is relationships. And it's unfortunate, Billy, that today in schools, unless something's changed, I see 101 economics, I see business management. I don't ever see a class on relationships. And they should be teaching that today, especially with the way we go about today's world with Zoom calls and everything else. It's so much harder to build relationships on a Zoom call than it is when you're, taking a customer golfing or going to one of their kids' weddings or something like that. So if I had to tell my younger self something, it would be focus on those core relationship building things. Again, family, your friends, and with your business associates.
So, Johnny G, I'm sure you've had a lot of dealer meetings over the years, but one that comes to mind to me, I think it was in the 90s, you had a meeting at the Superdome.
That's right.
In New Orleans for your dealers.
Yeah.
Was that a special meeting for you guys?
Oh, yeah. What happened there was we were coming into New Orleans to find meeting space, and New Orleans is a different town. It's a fun town, a great town, but there was not what my kind of venue would be for having a customer event. And so we were leaving kind of depressed, and as we're in the cab on the way to the airport, we passed by the Superdome. And I said to our meeting planner, hey, what about that? She goes, what about what? I said, what about the Superdome? Why don't we have the meeting here? She goes, I don't know. So we pull around back, and we knock on the door, and there's a big security guard there, and he greets me. He said, yeah. I said, yeah, we want to talk to somebody about renting this joint out. He goes, well, come on with me. Next thing I know, I rented out the Superdome, and we had our meeting in the Superdome. We had Indy cars crashing through paper. We had pit crew stuff. We had Roy Firestone and Jack Arute doing the announcing. We had the cheerleaders from the basketball team on the court. I had all of the management team running out in jogging outfits with American flags on them. It was a blast. And that was the last of what the old NTDRA meetings were. Because at that time, they were starting to struggle a little bit, Billy. And I told those guys, I said, I'm going to head to Vegas next year because there's this thing called SEMA. And nobody really knew what SEMA was back then. And I said, but, I think that's where the future is. So I then moved to Las Vegas, had a stint at Caesar's Palace for many years. And then we went to this another hotel called Bellagio and had quite a few great events there and rented out Thomas Mack Arena and used the parking lot with all our race car drivers to give ride and drives and stuff like that. So that was probably a story that ended up coming out of just, pure gut feel. It wasn't right to stay with the NTDR anymore. It was right to move on with SEMA, and for all our customers, they benefited.
Those Bellagio events were something else.
They were. But you know what, Billy? It's like anything else. I walk into your office here, everything's first class. You got bottled water, you got pen and pencils, you got everything's to a T, audience. When you go take a customer from Paducah, Kentucky, Cape Girardeau, Missouri to California, and you want to bring him in and tell him thank you for buying your product, why not take him to the best? Why, you don't want to go to a Holiday Inn, no offense, but you want to take him to one of the best hotels in the world, and they appreciated that. By the way, they always buy like 5 million tires every time they come, so it helped pay for the bills.
So, John, before we let you go, we have a bit of a tradition. We do a rapid-fire Q&A.
Okay.
I handle the Q, you handle the A.
Okay.
So I'm going to give you a quick question, and just off the top of your head, you give me an answer.
All right.
Okay. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of these questions.
Okay. I'm ready.
Question 1. Do you prefer track racing or off-road racing?
Track.
The fastest speed you've ever driven in a car?
195 miles an hour at the Las Vegas Motor Speedway at Mario Andretti Racing School. And I paid the guy that was leading us a free set of tires, so I went 5 miles faster than everybody else.
I think I know the answer to this one. Texting or talking?
Talking.
Favorite city in the U.S.?
Used to be Chicago. My hometown. A lot of things have gone on there recently. So right now, between Nashville, Tennessee, where I live 6 months of the year, and Scottsdale, Arizona are my two favorite cities.
Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant?
Oh, come on. I'll show you my screensaver. That's the sad part. I show most people today, servers, you know who this guy is? It's a picture of me and Michael. We don't even know who that is. Anyway, Michael Jordan.
Barry Sanders, Walter Payton.
Sweetness, my friend, sweetness.
Johnny, last question.
Yes, sir.
Can you say something in Japanese?
Ohayou gozaimasu.
And what does it mean?
Good morning.
Good morning. Johnny, great to have you with us.
Thank you. Pleasure being with you, man.
Glad to have you on AMN Drivetime, sponsored by Lightens.
I had a blast. Thanks, everybody.
This podcast is sponsored by Lightens. Lightens, your best source for OE quality automotive and heavy-duty accessory drive tensioning devices. We know tensioners because we invented them.